Topic 9, Lesson 5, Comparing and Ordering Fractions and Mixed Numbers. Today you will determine which of the two fractions or mixed numbers is greater or less in order to compare and order fractions and mixed numbers. All right, so make sure you have your books ready and your notebook and pencil. Page 230. Take a look at the very top. It says, how can you compare fractions? Let's look at this story problem to see how we can do that. Shauna and Tom walked two different paths in Trout Park. Shauna walked 5/6 of a mile, and Tom walked 3/4 of a mile. Which is greater, 5/6 or 3/4? Okay, so I'm going to put them right next to each other. Okay, here is a common error that people make. Sometimes people will look at the numerators and say, oh, well, 5 is bigger than 3, so therefore 5/6 must be greater. But that is a very common error. So, try to cross that out there. One way that we can do that is it says to compare fractions, find the common denominator. You're going to hear me say that a lot because that is how we can compare fractions. So we're going to have to write the multiples of each denominator. So notice that they did that here. One denominator is 4, one is 6. Okay, we have to compare the same size pieces. Okay, so that's why we're doing this. So listing the multiples, that's like saying 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 4 times 3, 4 times 4, 4 times 5, and you just list out a bunch of numbers, and then you don't have to list out all of them, obviously, that would take forever. But just list out a bunch until you find something in common. So 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, 6 times 4. I don't need to go any further because I notice that 12 is common for both of them. Okay, so I know that 12 could be my common denominator. So if that's the case, I'm going to use what I learned in the previous lesson about equivalent fractions. I turned 5/6 into 10/12 by multiplying by 2 halves. And then 3/4, multiply that by 3/3 to get 9/12. Okay, so we're just making equivalent fractions, but now they have the same size pieces, 12ths, so we can compare them. Okay, so in other words, now we can look at the denominators. 9 and 10, obviously 10 is bigger than 9, so I know that 5/6 is the person that walked the greater distance. Okay, so I always have to, if it's asking, 5/6 or 3/4, you got to go back to what the original fraction is. And they show that right down here. Okay, but you could also use a different common denominator. They use 24. You're just going to get smaller pieces. But it's the same thing. It's still showing that 5/6 is greater. All right, now look below in another example on page 230, and you will see now we're going to talk about comparing or ordering mixed numbers. Okay, so you don't need to write these down, but it's showing these mixed numbers, 2 and 5/12, except this one's not, 11/12, 3 and 1/6, and 2 and 1/3, from greatest to least. Okay, so in mixed numbers, all you need to do, first of all, is look at the whole number. You've got 2, 3, and 2. Okay, well, 3 is obviously the highest, so I already know then that 3 and 1/6 is my greatest, so I can cross that one off. Okay, then 11/12, that doesn't have a whole number by it, or in front of it. Okay, so I know that that has to be less than 1, which is what they showed here. Okay, so that one I know is my smallest. I can cross that off, and they've already got that here. Okay, but you have to compare the ones that both have 2 as whole numbers. So you're really comparing 1/3 and 5/12. And you go through that same process by finding equivalent fractions in order to determine, which they did here, 1/3 to 4/12. And I only had to find a common denominator for, or they both have 12 in common. So I didn't actually have to change 5/12. I could leave it the same. So 1/3 is equal to 4/12. Okay, 5/12 is bigger. So I know 2 and 5/12 is the next greatest. Okay. All right, so let's apply this real quick before you get to the rest of your assignment. I guess we have to move those out of the way. And be ready to write number 1. Okay, we got to write which one's greater. Okay, so number 1, obviously, you can see that it's fifths. They're both fifths. So I don't have to make any changes. Okay, 4/5 is greater than 3/5. Okay, look at number 2. Fourths and thirds. Okay, 1/4 and 2/3. So what do they have in common? Well, I can list out all the factors. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. Times 4 is 12. Okay, 4 times 2 is, well, I guess I could say 4, but times 1. But 4 times 2 is 8. Times 3 is 12. Oh, there's the first fraction they have in common, so I'm going to use that one. Okay, so I can do 1/4, make it equivalent to 12ths, or using 12ths times 3/3 to get 3/12. Okay, so this one I know is 3/12. And then 2/3, got to write over here, times 4/4 gets me 8/12. So I can write 8/12 over here. So now I know when I line them up, or when I put them in the place of thirds and 1/4, I know that 8/12 is bigger or 2/3 is larger. Okay, so that's how you're going to find your common denominator, or that's how you're going to find your common denominator so that you can compare them. So here when it says order the numbers from least to greatest, okay, you need to consider if there's mixed numbers, consider if there is similar denominators or not, and then you're going to have to find common denominators in order to determine which one's the greatest, least, and so forth. Okay, so do your best. Good luck. Rewind if you need a review on how to find common denominators, and ask questions of each other. Best of luck, guys.